Peace and blessings, YouTube family. Hopefully, you have enjoyed a marvelous Monday. Coming to you live from Atlanta. Welcome to another edition from the Doctor's Corner. Certainly hope that this message greets everyone in the best of health as we have another discussion today from the Doctor's Corner. And specifically, family, want to talk to you about caregiving. As each of you should know by now, certainly family caregiving is certainly something that is very personal to me and very important to me. It's something that's near and dear to my heart, and so certainly want to talk about one of the things I noticed in the news. I think on last week potentially. Don't quote. Maybe it was around October the 8th, so maybe a little bit more than a week ago. Governor Whitmore in Michigan signed a bill that will allow caregivers the opportunity to unionize, and that's family. I got to tell you, that's very important. It's refreshing to me to hear the national and political on the national and political scene for caregiving to be a discussion. It is something that I believe personally is greatly needed, certainly far overdue. And so this conversation today is really going to be geared towards everyone, but potentially those who may not be in the caregiving field. I mean, once again, I think this entire conversation will be something that will impact all of us. But I'm often reminded of the fact that I know for myself personally, we didn't have a plan. My family didn't have a plan in terms of thinking about when my mom became of age and we got older, what would we do? Right? There were discussions. Well, I shouldn't say there were discussions. There were statements that were made amongst my siblings and I in terms of what would be done. And, there was a sentiment, well, the majority of my siblings had their own particular feelings and sentiments. And me personally, I differed. Mine was one in which I don't believe in nursing care homes. I don't believe in that type of a setup. I've just, in my own personal experience, have seen too many instances um, where the care has been less than what I would have preferred for my family member, and so that was one aspect. But I think the primary aspect for me, and this is my own personal opinion on this. My personal aspect is, specifically when you're talking about a parent, right? A parent who has taken care of you, who has hopefully paved the way for you to be able to be the best productive citizen you can possibly be. In my mind, when one of the purposes of having children is so that when you do grow older, that those children will be there for you, right? And so that's something that that's just my mindset, family. And this is no condemnation on anybody else in terms of whatever their feelings are and whatever their thoughts are about that sort of a thing. Just for me personally, that's my mind on it. I don't, I think once again, when you have a family and you have children, in my own personal mind, you know, prayerfully, I've loved and taken care of my children well enough that if I, get anywhere near my mother's age and need help, need assistance, that they hopefully I've invested enough. I've made enough love deposits where they will want to be there for me. And so that to me is just kind of solidifies one of the goals and objectives of, once again, having a family, having children, right? So the whole notion of now when it comes time, to now do your part, right? To now take care of that family member, and to not do that, well, to me, it's just once again, I think I've stated that enough. It's just that's not my philosophy. So, but but with that, even though I had that notion in my heart, there wasn't a designated plan put in place. And so also there was no strategy in terms of when, right? So I became a caregiver for my mother. It was really it was rather spontaneous, right? She took ill, and it was a matter in terms of, I mean, her health deteriorated like that, right? And so something had to be done, and had to be done right then. And so from that perspective, I just want to frame this discussion today, this conversation today, around the fact of, we never know when we may end up having to lace up and put these shoes on, the caregiver shoes on, right? So I want to really say to everyone that's out there listening, whether you're already in this role, or whether you're on the sideline, and I really want to speak to you, those that's on the sideline, that you may have an opportunity to do it a little differently than what those of us who have just found ourselves thrust in this position. If you would maybe take heed of some of the things that we'll talk about today. So as I mentioned, Governor Whitmer of Michigan signed the bill in terms of allowing, I think they have like 35,000 home caregivers in the state. And so she signed a bill that basically creates a pathway for them to unionize. And I think that's extremely beneficial to the industry. Based upon what I can tell, the home care providers don't really have a significant unionized structure, right? I was only able to find two that kind of popped out. One appears to be extremely new. I couldn't basically find their inception date, but it's the caregiver union, I think is what it's called. Um, and there's some question in terms of their validity. I don't know in terms of, it didn't appear as if they've been around very long. But then you have the one that appears to be most known, with over 2 million members, is the Service Employees International Union. Service Employees International Union. That seems to be more for the service industry, that they kind of, that's pretty much the umbrella, but then you got caregivers that kind of come underneath that. So, the fact that VP Harris, has her proposal on deck in terms of for caregivers, in terms of her proposal, you got Governor Whitmer now that has signed a bill into law in the state of Michigan that will allow caregivers to specifically unionize. And, like most things, right? I mean, I think what we'll begin to see is across the nation, that wave will create, that will, once one state makes way and kind of provides that blueprint of how things like that can be done, typically what we see across the country, that same scenario begins to develop in other states. And that's not to say that other states don't already have it on the books. I don't know. I mean, I just know that this bill with the Michigan governor just recently occurred. So it's the main thing that's popped up out in the news today. But so my biggest suggestion to anyone who may not be in a position where they are the caregiver today, I would encourage you, get involved. That's the very first thing, right? Get involved. Know and understand what's happening in your own particular community. Know what laws are on the books currently as it pertains to caregivers in your area. As it relates to this proposal with VP Harris, whatever thoughts you may have on something like that, go to her website and let it be known, right? Review that plan. If there are aspects about that plan that you feel are good, let them know that. If you feel that it doesn't go far enough, let them know that, right? Get involved and get engaged, because the reality is, so, I was looking at some other numbers earlier today. So when we look at just the top four generations, right? I think the categorization wise, I think is probably a total of like 6 or 7. But if we just look at the silent generation, right, and that's basically people born between 1925 and 1945, right? The youngest member of that silent generation will be 79 years of age today, right? When you look at baby boomers from 1946 to 1964, so now you're talking about the youngest baby boomer today would be 60, right? Then you're talking about Generation X as goes from 1965 to 1980, where you're now looking at that youngest member is going to be 44 today. Then you're talking about millennials, right? From 1981 to 1996, with that youngest member being 28 years of age. Now, here's something else that's quite interesting. As of the last census, which we know was in 2020, there were 23 million members still alive from the silent generation. Now, of course, that was as of 2020, right? So, of course, that would mean that more than likely are less now, right? But then when we look at baby boomers, as of 2020, 71.6 million. Generation X, as of 2020, had 65.2 million members that identified in that group. And the leading group as of 2020 were the millennials. There were 72.1 million people in that millennial generation from 1981 to 1996. So what does all that mean? Well, what that means to me, family, is if you today are not in a scenario whereby you are having to assume the role as a caregiver today, if you're anywhere in that baby boomer from the youngest of 60 down to the youngest of 28 years of age from the millennials, odds are very likely, because when you start looking at from the baby boomers to the millennials, right? When I'm not even considering the silent generation right now, right? But if we just look at just within those three, you're talking about what is that? 71, 60. That's 136 million, and so that's not. So we're talking about over 200 million people between the boomers and the millennials. We're talking about over 200 million people that exist. Odds are, if you fall within any of those groups, odds are very likely you're going to be in a scenario where you're going to have to make a decision one day soon. You're going to have to make a decision. You're going to choose between, are you going to be taking your family member, whether that's your mother, whether that's your father, whether that's an older brother, whether that's an older sister, whether that's an aunt, an uncle. You're going to have to make a decision on whether or not you're going to be taking that family member to a nursing home, or you're going to be bringing them to your home. I mean, that's what these numbers tell me. That's what the statistics basically say to me when When we're looking at the youngest boomer today is 60 years of age. The youngest silent generation member is 79. Now put that in perspective in terms of the number of our people today, of our citizens today that are living longer. As I've mentioned to you before, my mother's 89, right? So she's 89. So she's 10 years older than this youngest silent of the youngest person that's in that silent generation. So that means, family, more than likely at some point, and maybe some point soon, depending upon where you are on the pendulum of that, you're gonna be faced with that crossroad of a decision in terms of what you're gonna do. So it would behoove you to get involved now. If you are in a position where you're not having to assume the role of a caregiver today, that means today is the perfect time for you to get engaged, to find out what's happening in your local district as it relates to laws that potentially are being discussed to be put on the books, laws that may already be on the books. What can be done to enhance provisions that will be of assistance to you if and when that scenario and that day basically presents itself where you will be in need. Because here's the reality: as these caregivers continue to unionize, right? So one of the pros, one of the positives, in my personal opinion, with that is, now because typically when you begin to start talking about unions, typically as a local, or as a former, I should say, as a former 1410 union member, training was something that was certainly always part of our union package, right? Because safety was something that was extremely important. So one thing that I foresee that will come through these unions will be enhanced and increased training. That certainly will be better for all of us who would be on the side of hiring these individuals to come in and take care of our family members, right? But the flip side of that is that as their training continues to enhance, and as different criterias continues to enhance, whether that's pertaining to licensing and permits and that sort of a thing, what is that going to also? That also means that the cost is going to increase. And I've spoken in a previous conversation in terms of caregiving expenditures is not for the faint, family. I got to tell you. I mean, it's depending upon your area, the cost of finding a caregiver can be quite extensive. And if you don't know, I'll just reiterate it again. That's those costs. That's all out of your pocket, because Medicaid nor Medicare pays for that, which is why I stipulated before is a complete game changer what VP Harris has put on the board, because that will put us in a situation where some of us will be able to apply for some sense of assistance, and that can. And I'm telling you now, if you're in a situation where you have a professional caregiver that you're bringing in, and let's just say you're paying them, $14, $15 an hour, right? Even if the proposal that VP Harris has put on board, let's just say, you're able to get just a third of that taken care of by Medicare. That's tremendous, right? Because you're talking about, if you're in a scenario whereby you need care, for your family member needs care, let's just say 9 hours a day. So 9 hours a day, if you're just talking about 5 days, that's 45 hours a week. That's not even including if you're going to bring them in on the weekend, right? So do the math on that, right? Do the math at $15 an hour. You're looking at 45 hours, right? And so, as the laws and that sort of a thing continue to enhance, that would also mean, of course, I'm sure once they begin to really unionize, that would also mean that they'll need to be paid, overtime, just like every other employee, right? So now you're talking about if you're paying them $15 for regular time, now you're at $22 an hour just in overtime. So it's quite extensive, family. I mean, it's quite extensive, and then when you add on, if that family member has, other medical needs, an understanding from medications that Medicare does not, cover 100%. So the cost can really, really, really be absorbent. And so that's why I'm encouraging you right now in this conversation. Get involved with your local political leaders and voice out your concerns. If you're in a situation, once again, where you're not a particular caregiver today, at least get yourself, knowledgeable, become knowledgeable about what's on the books currently, what discussions are being had, because if you take this time now and do that, you can certainly be ahead of the curve as it relates to if you find yourself, now having to make that decision, and instead of you being in a scenario whereby now you got to sit there and figure out, oh my God, there's no way we can afford it. Then what do we do? Because here's the other aspect. When people talk about nursing care isn't free. I mean, if you're going to put your family member in a nursing home, there's cost involved there as well, right? And so that's why I'm saying it will behoove you get involved, because this is not a scenario whereby you can just look the other way and it just goes away. This is not just going to evaporate, right? Which is why what you're seeing so much conversation in the marketplace today. It's why you're seeing it at the national presidential level, right? As you're seeing it even at the state level. You look at what Michigan is doing, right? What the governor of Michigan is doing. So, and we just discussed, we got at least over 200 people that are in that category that, we can easily say, when you're talking about 60 years of age, the youngest boomer, 44 years of age, the youngest Generation Xer, family, that means, I mean, certainly if you got a parent, or if you got an older brother or sister, or family member in any capacity that's anywhere between that would mean really in the next 5-10 years, just and if they don't have anything major to happen medically, they could be in a scenario where they're going to need potentially, need care, need round the clock care. So if you're not in that scenario today, I would encourage you strongly, look at your family today. Look at what category would they fit in, right? And if you are the one that is now deemed to be that family member to step in, I strongly encourage you, get yourself knowledgeable, find out what's happening in your local area. Get involved enough to be able to voice your opinion now. So if that scenario presents itself for you and your family, you would at least be versed enough to know what's available to you, right? So just wanted to have that conversation with your family. I mean, caregiving, once again, is something that, as our community continues to age, we all at some point, if you're not there today, I promise you, at some point, if it's not you, it's going to be someone that you care for and that you love, that you will eventually find yourself being in a position where you got to make a decision. And, if you do it now, if you be proactive, unfortunately, my family, we were not proactive, but gratefully, God has allowed me to be in a position to, for us, to be able to make the decisions that we made. But so in any event, family, I've gone a bit longer than I, you know, planned. But as you should know by now, the whole topic of caregiving is something that I certainly I hold dear, because it's so much that's involved, right? We talk about the self care that you need to provide yourself, to ensure that you're gauging and monitoring yourself, your emotions, to be sure, you're not at the level of burnout, because that is something that's so normal. You have so many different responses, so many responsibilities, is what I'm trying to say, that the stress of carrying it all, you're always on the verge of burnout. And so that's why self-care is so vitally important. That you're refueling and replenishing your tank enough to be able to be prepared for all of the ebbs and flow that occurs. Those days that's just extremely tough, that have you wondering and second guessing, if you can continue to do this, how much longer you can do this, all of those different things. Your resolve will come from what you've given yourself, the work you've done, to be able to provide yourself with the level of reserve energy, to be able to endure. So in any event, family, we will continue the conversations of caregiving. Any information that I see that pops across the screen, of course, I'm going to certainly share with you. But would love to get feedback from any of you, regardless of whether or not you are that caregiver today, or if you are that family member who are in a position where you can foresee, within the next 5, 10 years or so, you very well may be in that position. So, hey, listen, do me a favor, do the channel a favor, and hit that thumbs up if you would, please. If you found any of this information helpful, please share this, right? If you know of someone that is in the position of caregiving, or may be in the position of caregiving, they may, have some older family members or whatever, please share this video. Once again, as I've said, we certainly want to grow the community, right? So I'll ask you as well to hit that subscription button, and hit the notification bell. So anytime I upload, you'll be notified right away, and to kind of chime in. And so, hopefully you're finding this information informative. Hopefully you're finding it helpful. And hey, family, let's keep striving to be the best that we possibly can be every single day. Let's keep working on ourselves. For sure, let's be sure that we have as a mainstay, focusing on our self-care, right? Because no one will be able to gauge what we need better than ourselves. And so, please find a way, find a time, feed into yourself, give yourself that whatever it is that you're void of, whatever you need to refuel on. Provide yourself with that, and look forward to speaking to you again from the Doctor's Corner. Until then, peace, be well.